whoever you are, I'm Josh. I hope you're happy and healthy. Today is March 9th, and I thought since the Oscars have been awarded, now would be a good time to kind of chat about the movies that I watched in February. I didn't do the full-on award season binge that I usually do just because I was busy and I was adjusting to my new half marathon training, but I did watch a handful of them, especially in the best animated feature category, so I figured we could go through them and just break them down a little bit. The first movie I watched is a bit older, but it still fits the animated theme. From 2000, it's DreamWorks' movie, The Road to El Dorado. I've heard that this movie is super underrated in the history of animation, so I was excited to check it out. And I can say right off the bat, it is very early 2000s. I don't mean that as a good thing or a bad thing, just something that is. The animation style, the dialogue, the guitar songs about adventure over a montage of them hacking through the jungle, it's all there. Kenneth Branagh as Miguel was probably my favorite part of the movie. I feel like in these buddy animated movies, there's always a wide-eyed optimist and a cynic, and I feel like the optimist always ages so much better. It was a fun movie. I wasn't blown away, but I'm really into that period of Central and South American history, like the Aztecs, the Inca, the Mayans, so they kind of had me from the start on the premise. I was very happy they included the ancient Mesoamerican hoop ball game with the stone hoops that go on the walls. I'll put a picture up right now. It's so cool. I've always been fascinated by that, so I was glad it made it in the movie. Not DreamWorks' best, but relatively unique, and if you can't tell, I'm such a sucker for anything that depicts an ancient culture. Moving on to our first 2025 Oscar nominee, it is a doozy. I watched Emilia Pérez. I don't think I have a ton to add to this discourse that's new, but this was just a really baffling movie. Not even going to get into the Twitter drama, that's bad, we all know, it's not good. But in the movie, Carlos Sofia Gascon was pretty good. Zoe Saldana was also pretty good. And then aside from the two of them, this movie was total chaos. The songs were short and raspy and not very melodic. It was a lot of that sing-talking style we see in Les Mis, but not executed as well for me. The songs didn't seem to be adding very much except for some interesting visuals and an excuse to transition to the next scene. Some of these songs were a minute and a half, if that. It just wasn't really enough for me to justify making it a musical. We get very little in terms of seeing characters' inner landscapes or really much meaningful development at all. I would say on the whole, both from my eye test and from the discourse I'm seeing, the representation for both trans people and Mexican people was not great. I think Amelia Hansford for the Pink News summed it up really well. She said, "There are countless films that, while not perfect, have passion behind them in a way that makes their trans character believable and genuine. The point isn't that trans representation must be perfect, but that it has to be earnest, and Emilia Pérez does not feel earnest." People have obviously been talking a lot about the director Jacques Audiard being a cisgender French man making a movie about a trans Mexican woman, and it's one of those things where no, not every movie about a person of a certain minority identity or a certain place have to be made by a person of that identity and from that place, but when they come off as hollow and inauthentic, it's so easy to look at that and be yeah, it makes sense. I will say though, while I didn't agree with the awards hype for Emilia Pérez, it made me hopeful that the funding's going to be there in the future for people to tell stories about characters like this and get them seen by a lot of people. So maybe Emilia Pérez was just kicking down the door so someone else can just walk gracefully in. After that, I decided to take it back a few decades and I watched the Coen brothers' first ever movie from 1984, Blood Simple. This is a Western neo-noir starring Frances McDormand, and it's about a bar owner who finds out his wife is having an affair with one of his employees. And so obviously, as you do, he plans to get them both killed. And that's just the beginning of all the twists going on here. It's always interesting to see a director's first film because I feel like the elements of their signature style are always there, just less refined, and that was totally the case here. The emptiness, the dry Western landscapes, the human greed, and all the tension that makes you just want to claw your eyes out. It was all there. It's so similar in construction, at least as far as I remember, to No Country for Old Men. It's just lower budget and it's made by less experienced versions of the Coens. It definitely dragged at times, and I wish either the characters knew a little bit more about what was happening or we, the audience, knew a little bit less, because it just does take away from that tension a little bit to watch the characters try to figure out for half an hour a mystery that we already know the answer to, but the payoffs were still so good that was so much less of a negative than I thought it was going to be. If you like Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul and you're looking for a way to spend an hour and a half, Blood Simple should be on your list. But back to the Oscars, I watched this year's Best Animated Feature winner, Flow, directed by Ginsil Balotis. This is my category that I get obsessed with at the Oscars every single year, and so I did manage to watch 4 out of the 5 of them, and Flow was both my favorite and also my prediction to win. It's just so unique, like the no dialogue mixed with the video game style animation mixed with this beautiful and haunting world. It doesn't tell you anything more than what you need to know. Like, I love that Flo doesn't tell us who used to live in the cat's house. I love that there are these giant statues all around and we don't know who built them or where they came from. Like, it just makes the world feel so much more mystical and magical. It reminded me of the video game Abzu, if anyone's played that. Just such beautiful landscapes and animals wrapped up in this world that seems almost abandoned. Like, just such a beautiful homage to nature, and I cannot wait to see what Gintz and his team come up with next. And after that, I did take a brief break from the animated feature nominees to watch one of the best documentary short nominees. I watched The Only Girl in the Orchestra. It's a snapshot of Oren O'Brien, this double bass player and the first woman in the New York Philharmonic Orchestra, and she's really fascinating. Like, just such a powerful person, you know, crazy talent and work ethic as you'd expect. And we see her now in her late 80s retiring from playing and moving out of the apartment that she lived in for decades. The filmmaker Molly O'Brien is her niece, so she gets access to Oren's life and has all these candid and kind of intimate conversations with her about how she's feeling about all this change and her retirement. And it's just really interesting. And given Oren's kind of shy nature, it's probably something that an outside filmmaker couldn't get. I don't really think the doc did a crazy job of like elevating Oren's story. I think it's just who she is and her career that made it so fascinating. But like, I think that's kind of a big part of documentary filmmaking, is finding a subject that has the power to speak for itself, but no one would hear about it if it wasn't for you showing up and shooting it. Second to last here, we have Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Fowl. I have like a thing about claymation. Like, it's not phobia level, but it just kind of bothers me viscerally to the point that I don't go out of my way to see them, which is something I'm working on. But because of that, this was my first exposure to Wallace and Gromit, and I do see why they're so big. Like, it's just simple and warm, and it's this suburban English goofy thing, but it is still heartwarming. It did feel like it was targeted towards like a really young age group, like even younger than most animated movies. So I think that and the fact that only one of our main characters can speak did make it a little challenging for me to get fully emotionally invested, but the end was uplifting. And I think that if I had watched these as a kid and I had that kind of nostalgia connection, it might be something that I really enjoy. Like, I think the reminder of childhood is really powerful for a lot of people with this. And finally, the last movie I watched in February, we have DreamWorks' new movie, The Wild Robot. First things first, Lupita Nyong'o was the perfect, ideal casting for this. I cannot think of anyone who could have held this together better than she did. Kit Connor was good too, and Pedro Pascal brought this like earnest quality to his character that I think saved it from drifting into annoying territory. And then beyond them, the supporting cast was pretty deep, like Bill Nighy, Stephanie Hsu, Mark Hamill, Matt Berry. Like, there were 6 or 7 pretty solid names in here. We do get kind of thrown into the action at first, and then there's a time skip not long after. So the first half pacing is a little jerky, but I think in the second half, it finds its stride. And just the nature, found family, warm elements of this are so pleasant. Like, this is a great movie to watch the way I did on a really cold night. Obviously, I'm happy to see DreamWorks putting out something that's original and satisfying. And this was the only movie that I thought might take the Oscar from Flo, just because we know it sometimes in the past they've tended to pick movies from the big studios over smaller, more indie movies that might be better. But in the end, I enjoyed The Wild Robot. I thought it was uplifting and the cast did a great job, but I think the Academy did make the right choice. And that's it. Those are the movies I saw in February. I hope y'all are taking care of yourselves, eating and sleeping well. I'm going to be continuing my Oscars catch-up binge into March. I'm actually about to go see The Brutalist right now, so very excited for that. I love y'all. As always, I hope that heart was good. I don't think it was. But take care of yourselves, and I will see you next week.